The body of B. Franklin, printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here. Food for worms. But the work shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more elegant edition, corrected and improved by the author. All right, buddy, whatever.
From the Old South Meeting House in Boston and Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, it's Tea Party Tonight with Rob Crean. Presented by Revolutionary Spaces. With special guests. From the Smithsonian, Dr. Barbara Clark Smith. From Carpenter's Hall, Michael Norris. And now, a man of average height when compared to the Massachusetts delegation to the Continental Congress, Rob Crean.
Hey, welcome everyone, welcome to Tea Party Tonight, our 4th episode. Thank you so much for being here. The Old North Church recently restored its windows. It looks great, but I am disappointed they ignored my suggestion. Good luck to them, because sometimes it doesn't go so great. I know the last time I updated my windows, I lost Clippy. Plymouth Patuxent Museums are celebrating the settlement's 400-year anniversary with a new exhibit on meals in 1621. First on the menu, dirty water stew and mercury bread. The JFK Library and Museums have reopened, and they have a new exhibit about children in the White House. But I've learned over the past 4 years that making jokes about presidential children can get you fired from a comedy show. So, okay, here we go. Let's try one. Okay, the JFK Library has a new exhibit about children in the White House. The exhibit will be placed on the library fridge until the magnet fails, dropping it under the breakfast nook. Okay. Okay, I think it went okay. 2 men in Holyoke were accused of archaeological violation, vandalism, and trespassing after removing multiple dinosaur track fossils from a state reservation. They were stopped because they were seen carrying rocks and tools. I mean, come on, guys. If you want to smuggle out dinosaur stuff, you got to use Barbasol can. An 8th grade class in North Andover is doing a project attempting to clear the name of Elizabeth Johnson Jr., who was convicted of witchcraft in Salem in 1693. Cool, said any of the many wrongfully convicted people in American prisons today. With many states considering mandates for the COVID-19 vaccine, it's worth recalling that 115 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that vaccinations could be enforced by law when a Massachusetts guy refused to get one. Well, sure, but that was before they had microchips. Popular historian Nathaniel Philbrook has a new book, Travels with George in Search of Washington and His Legacy, highlights a trip the first president took to unify the nation. And personally, I think it's a lot better than his last book, Leadership from the Tub, How One Stuck Man Divided the Country. The Smithsonian is reporting that in World War II, Nazis were developing a nuclear program using a uranium cube. 2 on the nose? I didn't mean to say nose. I meant what I meant was you look good. It's working. It's working. Whatever you're doing is working. North Carolina is seeking to implement new social studies standards when the Fordham Institute gave the state's new standards a D-. Officials initially became worried when they noticed the state referred to as Top Carolina. That's not right. A Wall Street Journal editorial last month explored the question, is history grad school a waste of time? Nuh-uh, said a guy who thinks Indiana Jones is real and doesn't understand the difference between archaeology and history. Wait, do I understand the difference between archaeology and history? Shovels, I guess. I think it's shovels. This month, the House of Representatives voted to remove statues and busts of people who served in the Confederate Army and government. Just keep your mouth shut and bide your time, said the Benedict Arnold Monument in Saratoga. It's strange to even have Confederate statues in the Capitol building. When a team loses, you don't build monuments to that team in your own stadium. If that were true, there'd be a statue of the Phillies in every park in America. This month marks the 50-year anniversary of the Attica Prison Rebellion. In retaking the New York prison, law enforcement killed 128 men, including 9 hostages, and used ammunition banned by the Geneva Conventions. Pretty harsh, I know, but it was either that or give them better food and religious freedom. A new analysis of shoes believed to have been owned by Renaissance artist Michelangelo have led scholars to speculate that the painter-sculptor was likely about 5'2". Did you hear that, Molly? It wouldn't have been embarrassing to dance with me. You would have looked like you were dancing with a genius, a beautiful genius. In Irish news, this month, an 8-foot-tall ancient Celtic idol was unearthed in an Irish bog. Let's take a look at it. Breathtaking. It really is beautiful. Governor Charlie Baker has announced he will deploy the National Guard to help with the state's school bus driver shortage. It's better than the last plan to use the Coast Guard. A Boston woman visited every station on the T in 7 hours, 4 minutes, and 29 seconds. She now holds 2 records, fastest trip to visit every station and patient zero at most super spreader events. Revolutionary Spaces and the Tea Party Ships and Museum have just announced that, well, there will be Tea Party-related programming this year. There will be no Boston Tea Party reenactment in 2021. I guess it's up to me. This show is airing on September 30th, and we found out that exactly 60 years ago today, a county in Oregon actually cut a check to Great Britain for $1.95 to pay for what they calculated was their county's share of the debt for the Boston Tea Party. Oof, wait till they get the bill for Vietnam. Boston University made news this week when they committed to divesting from fossil fuels in a win for environmental activists. BU plans to use that money to double down on something they've already invested in heavily, ruining Kenmore Square. On September 30th, 1935, George Gershwin's Porgy and Bess premiered in Boston at the Emerson Colonial Theater. To honor this historic American opera, Weird Al Yankovic plans to finally release his parody, Porky and Bugs. Summertime and the living is not too difficult. Also, on September 30th, in 1787, the ship Columbia Revivida departed Boston on what would become the first time an American vessel circumnavigated the globe. Pretty impressive, sure, but did you hear about this lady that went to every MBTA station? We have a fantastic show for you this evening. We're going to be talking to Dr. Barbara Clark-Smith of the Smithsonian, and also we went to Philadelphia. We went to Carpenter's Hall where we got to talk to Michael Norris. It's going to be so much fun. We will be right back. See you then. We're in Philadelphia. We are in Philadelphia. That's right, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. The other city that compares itself to New York, well, New York doesn't even know it exists. This historic American town is the home of federalism, and while Independence Hall was all booked up, I took the opportunity to see as many other sites as I could, including the Constitution Center, the Second Bank of the United States Portrait Gallery, Washington Square, home of the Eternal Flame, historic Philadelphia City Hall, whatever this big chair is, and of course, the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
Trying hard now. It's so hard now. Feeling winded. Gotta lie down.
The main event was Carpenter's Hall, the building where the First Continental Congress met. It's still privately owned and operated today, and I've got a history date with its executive director, Michael Norris.
Hi. Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome.
I'm Rob from Tea Party Tonight.
I'm Michael Norris, Executive Director of the Carpenters Company.
Can you show me around?
Yeah, sure. So this is Carpenters Hall, built in the early 1770s by the Carpenters Company of Philadelphia. The company was founded as a guild of master builders in the 18th century through a complicated series of events and some political machinations. The hall was chosen to be the site for the First Continental Congress in the fall of 1774.
And that was in this first floor here, right?
That's correct.
So this is where it actually happened, where the First Continental Congress
That's
actually
correct.
happened.
Yeah.
It's pretty small.
Right. It's not a large space, but something to keep in mind is that the full Congress was not meeting in full session, all day long, right? So there were committees, that would meet off-site, private room at the city tavern, what have you, or even some, the rooms that, the committee chair was lodging in or whatever. So it was unusual for all 56 delegates to be in the same room at the same time.
Yes.
But yes, they did manage to squeeze themselves in here, and of course people were smaller then too, so
Yes.
which is something else to keep in mind.
I still am, personally. Yeah. So this first story is open to the general public.
Yes,
But I understand there's also a second story which is not.
that is correct. We have some meeting rooms, our company library, our staff offices are all up there.
Can I see it?
I think we can arrange that.
All right, great. Let's go. Wow.
Kind of cool, huh?
Yeah, this is amazing.
So this is the beginning of our library collection. We'll see more of it in a second when we go into the library proper. Come on in.
I thought that was the library. This is the library.
Yeah, that's just the overture. This is the real thing.
Wow. So what kinds of books are these?
So we have a really eclectic collection. The idea was that it was a functioning lending library for the members of the Carpenters Company and their families. So clearly we have books about architecture and construction and building, as a professional association. But there's also a wide variety of other topics: history, fiction, books for young people, anything that would be of interest. This bottle is actually really fun because it is
Bottles so often are.
so it's a bottle of beer, so that's fun.
Yeah.
And it was given to us by the London Carpenters Company and it is allegedly beer that was brewed from grain that was grown on the estate in England that belonged to General Cornwallis.
Oh, wow.
So, and for those of you who forget, General Cornwallis was the British general who sort of blew the war for the other side, and so our friends in London thought that that was kind of funny. This box is actually still used by the company today. It's the way that we vote new members into the company. So. The membership of the Carpenters Company is self-perpetuating. You have to be nominated by another member, a current member of the company, to join. And at our quarterly meetings, when new members get put up for nomination, this box gets passed around, and it's sort of the old school way of voting. If you're you put your marble in if you're in favor, and you don't if you're not. So the number of marbles at the end tells us if the new member was voted on.
Wow, that's really cool. When does this box go back to?
This method has been used since the beginning of the company. This box, we believe, dates from the early 20th century. So, they had to replace it over the centuries.
And sorry if I broke it.
Yeah.
Do you think I could get in?
Well, it depends. Are you an architect, an engineer, or a builder?
You'd have to really stretch the definition of those things for me to qualify,
Right.
I think.
Right. So that's why I'm not a member either. So those from our original bylaws, define who can be members. So, so even so, to this day, our members are not just random anybody's. They're folks who are specifically working professionals in the building industry. So this is our Dalkeith room. Dalkeith is the town in Scotland that Robert Smith, who was the master builder of Carpenter's Hall, was from. He was actually one of the leading master builders in all of the colonies in the 18th century. So he designed a number of places here in Philadelphia, but also sites in Williamsburg, Princeton. So he was pretty prolific. And this room is dedicated sort of to his memory. So it shows some of our period furniture and portraiture, to sort of evoke the feeling of what a room in Scotland, or frankly here at that time, would be like. So, but what's even more interesting is that in the Revolutionary period, this room housed the Library Company of Philadelphia, which was founded by Benjamin Franklin. One of the many things he founded in Philadelphia. And
he lived in Philadelphia?
Rumor has it.
Yeah,
no.
I think of him as a Boston guy, but I guess he lived here too.
Right. Yeah, he had to run away and find his, his true calling here. But so the Library Company was housed here. It was actually here during the First Continental Congress. So while the delegates were meeting downstairs, they had access to the collection of books up here. That Franklin and the other shareholders of the Library Company had put together. So, and then Franklin, who had recently returned. So Franklin was not at the First Continental Congress. He was still in England at that time, but he returned to Philadelphia in 1775. And obviously became very active in the war effort and the independence effort. So one of the things that he did in secret at that time, but we now know about, is that he organized a series of secret meetings between the Patriots, and I don't mean the football team.
They've been gotten in trouble for some secret meetings.
Yeah. So Franklin organized these meetings between a spy, an envoy who came over from France, again in secret. The war, this was December of 1775, so the war had already started, so they clearly didn't want the British to know that this was happening. But an emissary came over from France to Philadelphia. Franklin organized the meetings. It was him and John Jay and this guy from France whose name was Bonvouloir. And they met here over a couple of nights, again in secret, after dark. to discuss the possibility of France becoming America's ally in the revolution. So that, of course, subsequently happened, and there was a formal, alliance with France that led to their participation in the war, which of course was, hugely significant in helping us to win the war. But the seeds of that diplomatic alliance really happened right here in this room.
So this room that I'm sitting in now is where Benjamin Franklin convinced France to be our ally in the Revolutionary War.
There were many other meetings, but yes.
So my butt is in basically the same vicinity as the place that diplomat Benjamin Franklin's butt was when he was negotiating with France.
That is true. The chairs are different, but yes.
Yeah. But all these years later, butts remain relatively the same. They haven't changed much. I'm not sure I should be allowed in here.
I know. It's kind of crazy because, my office is right off of this room.
Wow.
So just to sort of come to work every day and feel like,
Yeah.
wow, this is an active, vital space, but it's also this amazing repository of history is pretty cool.
What are some other ways that this space was
Yeah,
used?
so it was used very often as a bank. So the first bank of the United States, which Alexander Hamilton started as our first Treasury Secretary, was housed here while their building was being built across the street.
Did they give out lollipops? Do you know that? I don't. That may not have.
Yeah, that doesn't show up in the record. So there's a long connection to the history of finance and the economy because the first bank was in this building. Actually, the second bank of the United States, the Bank of Pennsylvania, the Bank of North America. Right. So there were multiple banks who used the first floor for offices.
Carpenter's Hall was the first privately funded preservation project in America. Old South Meeting House in Boston was the second privately funded preservation project in America. And so as a Bostonian, I have to ask you, do you think you're better than me?
Well, obviously.
Fair enough, fair enough. This building obviously is a really important building in the history of the American Revolution. But why does someone who doesn't necessarily see themselves reflected in that history or feel invested in that history, why is this building important to people like that?
I think because it reflects the sort of the duality of what was happening back then, and really what still happens today in our politics and in our sort of public discourse. So clearly, we hosted the First Continental Congress, the Founding Fathers, right? A bunch of rich white dudes, right? All of that is true, and a lot of good things came from that. But there was also really active citizen engagement in people who were for or against independence or not, and many of those folks were women. Many of those folks were freed African Americans in Philadelphia, and so that sort of richness of political engagement and citizen activism was very prevalent then, and I think that's part of the story that not everyone really pays attention to. We just think it's like dudes in wigs sitting around a table, right? But there was very much a sense of people, and because they were defining or trying to define a new republic, the role of individual citizens was highlighted and heightened, right? So people knew that this was an opportunity to sort of reshape the way they were governed and the way individual citizens could participate in their own governance. And all of that is still relevant today, right? So we're still arguing about some of those questions.
Thank you so much for showing me
Oh,
around.
a pleasure.
Yeah, this has been great. What is coming up next for Carpenter's Hall?
Well, we are 3 years away from 2024, which is our big anniversary year. So it is not only the 300th anniversary of the Carpenters Company itself, it's also the 250th anniversary of the First Continental Congress. So we are planning a lot of cool stuff. to celebrate those milestones. The one that I'm most excited about is that we are going to be, instead of doing a traditional sort of reenactment of the First Continental Congress, we're actually doing a Young People's Continental Congress. There were 56 delegates at the First Continental Congress, and through the magic of coincidence, there are actually 56 states and territories now in the United States. So we're going to have one student from each territory or state come here, so it'll match exactly the number of people, which will be really fun, but it'll be in a very contemporary context, right, where they're talking about what young people think today about government and democracy and how we make it better.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So come back in 2024.
And please, if you ever make it to Boston, come to our...
I don't know, Boston.
Yeah, the traffic is terrible. Thank you so much, though.
My pleasure, thank you.
Philadelphia has a lot of charm and what seems like unique character, but if you dig down, you'll find a lot of what makes Philadelphia great was actually made, at least in part, in the Boston area. We've dug into this issue and we're excited to do a special Revolutionary Spaces Spotlight Report from Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia called The Taker State. First of all, Ben Franklin is always associated with Philadelphia. It's where he invented the lightning rod, a new type of stove, and even a flexible urinary catheter. But you know what Boston invented? Ben Franklin. You're welcome, America. Rocky Balboa is a Philadelphia legend. But did you know that Sylvester Stallone was inspired to create his boxing icon by Boston area boxer Rocky Marciano? Hoping to dramatize Marciano's rough and tumble Brockton, Massachusetts upbringing, Sly decided to set his movie in the roughest looking place on the East Coast. And, well, Brockton was pretty run down. Shooting in Philly was cheaper, and the burning trash cans were already there. Carpenter's Hall issues a David McCullough Prize for great accomplishments in bringing public attention and enthusiasm to American history. The prize is given out periodically, whereas in Boston, we put out a new David McCullough book every 2 years like clockwork. I mean, this guy's catalog is immense. Of course, there's the Philly cheesesteak. Most people don't know this, but the Philly cheesesteak was actually inspired by Boston's clam chowder bread bowl. Legend has it that a young Philadelphian patriot visited Boston and enjoyed a clam chowder bread bowl so much that he brought one for all his family back home. However, when he got home, it was a soggy bread mass with brown gross meat and congealed dairy. But it was still better than most Philly fare. They tried to reconstruct it with yellow cheese food instead of cream, and by replacing our fine, decent, majestic clams with trash cow meat, and a mid-Atlantic staple was born. The Liberty Bell. It's easily the most recognizable symbol of Philadelphia and arguably of America. But nobody even cared about the Liberty Bell. They didn't even call it the Liberty Bell until abolitionists from Boston and New York adopted it as a symbol for the anti-slavery cause in the 1830s. Due to its biblical inscription, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. Philadelphia was sitting on what would become one of the most cherished symbols of American freedom, and it took Boston and New York, sworn enemies, for all time to come together to help them figure out how to talk about it. And what did Philly do with this newfound national treasure? They broke it. Philadelphia City Hall is famous for being the largest municipal building in America. But did you know that they got the idea for a city hall like that from Boston? No, not that one. Yeah, this one. The old City Hall of Boston was built way back in the 1860s, making it one of America's first buildings in the French Second Empire architectural style. Philadelphia thought it was cool and made their own. And I don't want to say that they're compensating for something, but look at this thing. Boston replaced its City Hall with this thorough being cool utilitarian gem, and devoted our old City Hall building to serving steaks, unsullied with cheese. Philadelphia had the first Continental Congress, and the second one. But why did those even happen? Little something called the Boston Tea Party. Ever heard of it? Yeah. After we destroyed 342 chests of tea by dumping them into the harbor, that's part of the ocean for you river people, Great Britain passed the Coercive Acts, shutting down Boston's port, occupying it again, and dissolving the government. And weirdly, funding the Catholic Church in Quebec. Anyways, the whole reason for the Continental Congress in Philadelphia was because we acted up. We created the problem. All Philadelphia did was try and solve it. Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston, but wrote A Telltale Heart and other works while living in Philadelphia. Philly boasts the Edgar Allan Poe National Historic Site, and I think it's pretty clear that Philadelphia was inspired by Boston to steal credit for Poe from Baltimore. They have so little. Boston has Faneuil Hall, which clearly inspired Philadelphia's famous hall, Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates. I'm watching your every move. Philadelphia's music scene has clearly been inspired by Boston. The Roots were obviously inspired by the Hub's own New Kids on the Block, whereas Boyz II Men obviously owe a huge musical debt to Godsmack. My producer Matt was against that joke. He said, no one remembers Godsmack anymore. And I said, well, that's good. We could all just really use some good news right now. And apologies to Michael Bivins for that one. We know you worked hard. And finally, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is a classic fish-out-of-water story of a lower-class kid from West Philadelphia who finds himself surrounded by the upper class. Clearly just a simple switcheroo of the classic Boston story of Fraser Crane on Cheers. From Carpenter's Hall, this has been The Taker State. We'll be right back. Now we're back in Boston at the Old State House, and I'm about to sit down for an interview with Dr. Barbara Clark Smith of the Smithsonian. Our next guest is the curator of political and military history at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History and the author of The Freedoms We Lost: Consent and Resistance in the Revolutionary Era. She's an expert on 18th century American history with a focus on social, political, and home life. Welcome, Dr. Barbara Clark Smith.
Thanks very much, Rob. Great to be here.
Your book, The Freedoms We Lost, it talks about exactly that, the freedoms that we lost. Now, generally, when we talk about the American Revolutionary War, it tends to be in terms of the freedoms that we gained. But what were some of the freedoms that we lost?
You're right that we start with the freedoms we gained, and I at no point deny that we gained them. We certainly gained some freedoms from the revolution, but in retrospect, we tend to focus on that and not necessarily on ideas of freedom that were important at the time, but aren't so important now. That includes policing. Policing was an institution that was very different from what it is today. In the colonial period, the colonists in British North America chose not to have a professional police. Right? I mean, you probably remember they were opposed to standing armies in peacetime. That's partly because they were afraid those armies would enforce unpopular laws, right? And they preferred having sheriffs or constables, different officials with different names who might be elected or might be appointed in different colonies, but who relied on ordinary people in the community in order to enforce the law. The second one would be in the courtroom, where people, these sort of men, could sit on a jury. And the jury had a somewhat different role then, because the king is the one prosecuting, right? So if I was accused of a crime, it would be Rex, meaning king, Rex v. Smith, not the people v. Smith. No, in that courtroom, it's the petty jury that represent the people. And juries had various prerogatives to have a say, not only in what actually happened, the facts of a case, but also in whether it was illegal, whether the law actually applied to the facts that they found. And then finally, besides the policing and the courtroom, there's another arena where ordinary people can also make their voice heard, and that's when there were public punishments, because people weren't all shunted off into prisons where you don't see what's happening. There were often physical punishments, of course, standing in the stocks, being beaten in the stocks, and ultimately hangings and executions. And at all of those occasions, there were spectators who kind of participated. For example, you could be very sympathetic to someone in the stocks because you really didn't think what they did wasn't so bad. Or you could throw eggs at them or something too, if you really thought what they did was horrible. And even when it came to executions, it was possible, if there was very strong local public opinion, for a rescue to take place, somebody to be rescued from hanging, because there weren't enough police, there weren't armed men enforcing this. So it required some participation by people. I do want to say that it's important to remember that all these places for popular participation in enforcing the law existed because the head of executing the law was not elected. It was the king, right? So you haven't had a choice yet. You've had a choice about passing the law by having a voice in your legislature, or in the lower house of your legislature. In England, in the House of Commons, in the Parliament, if you were in England. So as Englishmen, American colonists felt, okay, we have that voice, that's critical to freedom. But they also thought voices in execution of the law were critical. And it's precisely because that was the execution of the law was taking place under auspices of the king, whom nobody had much choice about. Some people have written and said, well, Barbara Clark Smith calls these freedoms, and they're not exactly freedoms because they're forms of participating. Mm-hmm. And my answer to that is, I think that's really kind of what freedom is. I don't think freedom means no one ever bothers you ever, and you're never subject to anybody else's or any authority. That's just not the way the world is. I think it means you have a say in who the authority is and in how that authority is used and what our rules are that we agree to live by, and that say is real.
Well, and you also talk about sort of there's the right to be legislated, for laws to be created, and then the right for those, whether or not those laws are followed, are kind of viewed as pretty different. You know, now if a law is passed, it's the attitude is, well, now that's the law. But
Right.
back then, it seems that people would often just choose to not follow laws, and that was kind of, if the community felt that that's the way it should be, that's the way it would be.
Yeah, to a degree, that's true, and we assume all the important decisions have been made by the time it becomes a law.
I guess that is still kind of true today. I mean, we don't use blinkers anymore. We're driving.
But it is true that people got accustomed to realizing that some laws may not really apply the same in every place, and so there was a lot more space for it being different. And that's partly because places were further apart and you weren't traveling. I mean, we want a fairly standard set of laws because we want to be able to travel to another state and not be surprised that something is illegal there, or, you know, we have dealings on a much broader scale. So some of it's just practical. But I do think the system of common law, which says it matters what the precedent is. It matters what the other earlier courts have said in this neighborhood, right? And it might be different here than there, and so of course there's always some slippage between what the law says and how people actually live,
Right.
and what an excellent, perfect enforcement would be, and what's actually possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Like there are jaywalking laws in Boston.
there
but
are laws.
we, as a society, have decided that those are not enforceable.
Those are not enforceable.
But another thing that you talk about in the book a lot is you talk about the sort of the people and the mob. What are the differences between the people and the mob?
Well, that's always to be argued about, right? The people are when the ones I admire and agree with are doing something, and the mob is when the ones I disagree with are doing something. And whether that would be, in my view, whether what gets determined depends on how the law works out. So you can think of something like the Boston Massacre crowd, and I think we often use the word crowd because it's kind of more neutral.
Yeah.
The British would have called that a mob, and whether they could convince people, yeah, that's a mob, and therefore they not representing the people, depended on many things, including what sort of people were there, right? In the case of the massacre crowd, it was tricky because there were fewer well-to-do, respectable merchants or elite people around, or even solid middle class. There were some people who could kind of be considered ruffians, and sailors are kind of, they sort of live here, they don't really live here, they're not the most peaceful, law-abiding group. Crispus Attucks, African-American, so the decision of the Patriots to say, no, that group includes apprentices, it includes artisans, laboring men, sailors, that counts as the people, was a very strong statement. And whether they could make that stick or not would depend on what happened at trial. So part of what's what you had to figure out if you were going to go contest the law, or going to go try to rescue someone from punishment, or any of those things, was, could you get away with it, or would you be hunted down? And that depended on how many connected and respectable people you had connections with, and also how you behaved, right? I mean, you could behave in ways that were so destructive, even of property, that it was unquestionably going to offend the propertied people. And you had to have at least some of those people on your side. I think the most important thing to know is that those things were unsettled, even at the time the crowd is acting. It isn't clear if they'll end up being defined as a riot, and some people will end up punished for taking part, or whether it will be the voice of the people.
You're particularly interested in social and home life in this time period. How did the revolution change women's lives?
Well, that's one of my favorite topics, because I think until fairly recently, we saw women as not participating in the revolution, or a few of them participated, like Molly Pitcher at the Battle of Monmouth, New Jersey. Since I grew up in New Jersey, I learned about Molly Pitcher at school as a kid. And we now are looking at it differently. We've learned a lot. We realize that if you're going to look at the arenas where men were assigned to participate, like the Army, you're going to see few women. But there were lots of areas that women were participating in. And I think the main one, prior to the outbreak of the war itself, was in the non-importation, non-consumption agreements, those trade boycotts against British goods. So when Britain passed taxes on this various imports, consumer goods, so paper or lead and tea and any number of things, neighborhoods got together and began agreeing to boycott those goods. And it starts with merchants saying, merchants in Boston saying, we're not going to buy these things and sell them because there are taxes on them. We don't, and that would set the precedent that it's okay to tax us. And we don't believe that. So let's start a movement that's buying homemade products. And for women, for elite ladies, it means not sitting and drinking tea and tea parties. But for most women, farm women, ordinary women in artisan shops or who are married to artisans running the household, it means not purchasing English cloth, English tea, and producing as much as you can, homespun cloth. And so what this did that was interesting was it created this space in which women could show their allegiance to this patriot cause.
Yeah. But thank you so much for your time. This has been so interesting. The book is called The Freedoms We Lost by Dr. Barbara Clark Smith. We'll be right back. Surprisingly, the most popular segment on our show is the one about booze. And so we're doing it again. This month, we went with a drink that's a little bit more modern. It's from the 19th century, and it's called the Ward 8.
Welcome back. Glad to be here again. Tonight, we are making the Ward 8, which is a whiskey-based cocktail originally developed in Boston at the Lockover Restaurant Historical Institution. Closed down in 2012, but until then was the fourth oldest restaurant in Boston, right behind Jacob Wirth, which also has sadly closed down. This cocktail is attributed to Martin Lomasney, who is a political boss in Boston, sort of the ward boss of Ward 8. It was made in celebration of one of his many electoral victories. He used some pretty heavy-handed tactics, also did a lot for his constituents. So I'm excited. You guys excited?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So excited.
One thing
Awesome.
I'm excited about is that this cocktail seems like it will taste good, unlike some of the ones
Yeah,
we
I
have
think
had
that's-
in the past.
it's a big benefit of having a cocktail that was made in more recent history.
When was this
Yeah.
made again, Wes?
I believe 1898.
What is this?
That's a jigger.
I don't know if you could say that, Matt.
Yeah, no.
The ingredients are pretty palatable themselves. So we've got some rye whiskey.
I know the recipe said rye whiskey. I don't know the different types of whiskey.
So you have Jameson.
Basically, rye whiskey officially in America has to have at least 51% of its mash, the element that you brew it from, made out of rye wheat versus say corn or malted barley. Bourbon is mostly corn, 51% corn. So that's the main difference. From what I understand, bourbon is a lot sweeter. And if you use rye, you're going to get a more dry, spicier sort of cocktail.
Do you know which one Jameson is?
Would not even be able to tell you the main differences. I'm sure we have a very knowledgeable member of the audience who's screaming at their computer with a cocktail in hand right now. Like, how could they not know?
If you are a fancy man watching at home, comment on YouTube. Tell me, non-man, what whiskey this is. I just drink it, but you probably know so much.
Don't forget to begin your comment with actually.
Absolutely. Fun rye whiskey fact: George Washington at Mount Vernon, his estate, at one point in time was the largest distiller of rye in America. Recently, they have started up distilling rye at the Mount Vernon estate. Hopefully this time with less slavery, I haven't done the research.
Hopefully.
This drink was made at Lockover, which was downtown in Boston.
In Good Will Hunting, when Professor Lambeau Skarsgård takes Robin Williams out, they're actually at Lockover. In 1875, Locke, the guy who had started it, he petitioned to expand from 2 Winter Street to 3 to 4 Winter Street as well, like make the restaurant bigger. And the guy who secured the financing for it was Eben Jordan, who is the guy who started Jordan Marsh. So there's all kinds of Boston history locked up in that place.
It is sad that bar is closed, but don't be too sad because it has been replaced by a Taco Bell. So that's pretty exciting.
Also a very important part of Boston.
There's a very nice restaurant now where Lockover used to be.
Yes. Okay.
Yvonne's.
Talk about the little bit of Down Winter.
Lockover is right down the street from Old South Meeting House, one of our sites. And this drink was invented down the street from Old South Meeting House and Old State House, really right after those buildings were preserved. So just as Old State Houses and Old South Meeting Houses historical histories were starting to be created, this drink's history started as well.
You just did a great job of justifying why we should be doing this drink.
Amazing.
Let's all go through our ingredients.
All right.
Let's start with the whiskey. What'd you guys get?
I have Jameson left over from a gig I had in Rochester, New York.
Wait, that doesn't explain it. How'd you get whiskey out of a gig?
Comedy pays really badly.
I've gotten paid in alcohol before.
We're all comedians. We're familiar with the famous
The old Rochester Jameson payment.
Rochester Jameson show where every comic has to bring a bottle of Jameson, and whichever comic drinks their entire bottle dies. I got this straight rye whiskey. I don't know if straight is the brand name or if Stead is just.
Yeah, it looks like it's made by the Illuminati. What is
Yeah, I
happening?
believe so.
The whiskey
Isn't the
no
pink
homo
triangle
on
is the symbol for gay liberation, or one of them?
Oh,
Love
look,
it.
look, it's gay rye whiskey. Now it's straight rye whiskey. Now it's gay rye whiskey. Now it's straight rye.
I guess it's like spaghetti. It's straight until it's wet.
Hot and wet.
Boom.
I also want to say, I don't know if any of you guys remember the television show Lost, but doesn't this look like it would be a product in the bunker of Lost?
Yeah.
I have Bullet. Looks like it should be Bullet. Forgive me if I'm wrong. The same guy who was after Kendrick. Get at me in the comments. Let me know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
I got Elijah Craig straight rye.
So apparently during Prohibition, grenadine was made out of pomegranate juice and cane sugar. So I got this bougie organic grenadine that's actually made out of pomegranates. So
Cool.
I'm really excited about that.
I got red corn syrup.
Mine's actually just red antifreeze.
This is gonna ferment in my tum-tum.
I got the cheapo lemon juice myself. Blanchard's didn't have lemons. I don't know why. They didn't have lemons and they didn't have cocktail spear, so I just have toothpicks.
That's better than me. I'm using a folded up Starbucks straw.
I'm using a metal straw that my roommate has as the cocktail stirrer. And then I'm using reconstituted juice a la Market Basket.
1 ounce fresh squeezed orange and lemon.
I killed an orange for the fresh squeeze.
Died for a good cause.
I also have fresh lemon and fresh orange juice. And I have a lovely skewer for my cherries.
I strained out extra pulp orange juice to make regular orange juice.
I don't have a skewer for my cherries. I was just gonna drop them in.
This cocktail is basically a whiskey sour, and except in a whiskey sour, if you just say that without any qualification, you're generally going to be using bourbon instead of rye. But I also found that there's a Boston variation of the whiskey sour where you add a little bit of egg white. And I don't know what that says about our city, but we're not doing it because I remember the first one of these when we put eggs in the drink, and it did not work out well for me.
Sounds like we know what we're making next show. It's important we don't skip over the types of cherries that everyone got because I got Luxardo cherries because I'm fancy, but I suspect that Rob did not.
No, I did not. I got the $4 cherries.
Yeah,
I got the Market Basket cherries.
I got Dell's Maraschino.
Whiskey Bro in the comments is going to lose his mind about these cherries, guys.
Probably. 2 tablespoons is 1 ounce. I do not own a shot glass because I am a woman pure of heart, and I have never done any debauchery in my life.
Straight from the bottle.
2 ounces of whiskey, ½ ounce of orange juice. So the bottom side of your jigger there. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
½ ounce. Great.
That's so much orange juice, Rob.
½ ounce of lemon juice.
All right.
And then the grenadine.
2 teaspoons of grenadine in. I just love that we're doing this for Lomasny. He is famous for once saying we're supporting a bill that the Cardinal, the Archbishop of Boston, did not want to support. And the Cardinal, through emissaries reached out hey, maybe go a different way on this. And he reportedly told the guy to tell the Cardinal, tell his eminence to mind his own business.
My ice is kind of melty, so it might be a little watered down, but it looks like this. I put in the cherries already.
All those times James Bond ordered that drink, he was putting severe strain on the forearms of every server. I hope he tipped at least 22%.
I'm excited to try this.
It smells nice
It does.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very fruity.
with a whiskey edge.
Yeah.
It smells less sweet than bourbon though. Like it's made of a hardier grain, maybe.
Yeah. A grain like rye.
Like a rye, like it's a rye grain.
Smells strong as hell.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah.
Man, you could
Cherry straw.
You can degrease your engine after you're done.
To
Ward 8.
To Ward 8. And notable too, it's worth mentioning that, we're making this drink that was invented in a period of political change in Boston, as we're in the middle of another major political change in Boston, have a major mayor's race coming up. Someone's going to win that doesn't look like a mayor that we've had before. So that's kind of cool.
I'm so sick of these Josiah Quincy mayors. It's just like, can we finally have a mayor not named Josiah Quincy?
It's just
This
dozens
is
of
the
them.
perfect audience and the only audience for that joke, Rob, and I appreciate you. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's good.
This is good. Yeah.
Not bad. It's quite tart.
Yeah.
It's a lot
Yeah.
of citrus in here.
Yeah, there's a lot of citrus, but then like in the back of your throat, the whiskey comes up after the citrus is done.
I'll tell you, my virgin one tastes like if you let that candy Smarties. It tastes like if you let those dissolve in some orange juice.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, it's not bad, but
This drink feels weird in your nostrils, which I just found out.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good. I would totally have too many of these at a bar and then embarrass myself.
Oh, I'm sure many Boston politicians absolutely did exactly that at the Lockover. So you're in good company.
Yeah, I love being in the tradition of Boston politicians.
It is interesting. This is a very fruity, very pink cocktail. So it's not what I would normally associate with like backroom, hard scrabble Boston political wheeling and dealing.
It's like visually really misleading, right? Because it looks like this fun fruity drink, but there's still a solid punch of booze in there, right?
I think if I didn't know the history of this drink and I had to name it, I would name it Virginia Slims because it sounds like it's going to cheat on its husband.
Hell yeah.
If I was gonna drink a piece of history, I'm glad I did it with such great folks. Thank you.
Aww.
That's sweet.
Thank you, John Paul. This is great.
I'm sorry, that's the grenadine talking.
I'm gonna chomp on one of these cherries now because it's been soaking for a minute.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah. I wouldn't
Remember-
necessarily think to put cherries in with citrus like this. But I like it.
Important to note, Lamazny was actually a teetotaler his entire life. He had actually he was like a guy you did not want to make enemies with. Apparently, like he kept files of embarrassing information about potential opponents and like really used that to his advantage. But from what I understand, he outlawed drinking at like his private club where all his cronies hung out, and he really didn't indulge himself. So they made this drink for no one, and I'm not mad about it. Let's pour one out to the residents of the West End, which was bulldozed for a major expressway.
The West End Museum has great programming on the history of the West End.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic for everyone watching. If you are just irate about our lack of whiskey knowledge, let us know in those YouTube comments. I'm sure we messed something up. We're here for the well, actually. We're here for it. Thank you for watching. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Halloween is just around the corner, and what could be scarier than history? This year, consider making your costume both spooky and informative with these brand new costumes inspired by two of America's most foundational cities, Boston and Philadelphia, in a segment we call Boston versus Philadelphia. America has had countless presidents in its short history. Now you can preside over your Halloween party with this impeccable costume of one of our nation's most can-get-it presidents, John Adams. Generally believed to be our country's second president, John Adams is best known for being portrayed by Paul Giamatti in the HBO miniseries creatively titled John Adams. This costume has been painstakingly crafted to best represent Giamatti's turn as Adams, including carefully sculpted jowls. Alternatively, pair the mask with casual dress to go as Paul Giamatti from literally any other movie he's made, except Planet of the Apes. Pay tribute to a president in all his American splendor. Philadelphia is home to America's third best bell. Commissioned in 1752, the bell's most distinct feature is that, well, it's broken. But just because it's old doesn't mean it can't get freaky. Introducing the sexy Liberty Bell. You'll turn heads as the Philly landmark draped in a slinky, skimpy negligee made of the finest lace and silk with a low neckline all the way down to the crack. This Halloween, freedom doesn't ring, it moans coquettishly. Rocky is an iconic Philadelphia character. Unfortunately, the license to his likeness is extremely expensive, so instead we present to you Rockman. With enough legally distinct differences to absolve us from any liability, you can now reenact any of your favorite scenes from the films, which we're not allowed to show you here because of copyright laws. And hey, reuse the costume over and over again, because just like the film series, why not do the same thing over and over? Boston has long been an iconic setting for TV and film, and has served as the backdrop for stories ranging from racist mobsters to racist college students to racist mailmen. Now, you can dress as one of Boston's most iconic characters, the Bench from Good Will Hunting. Crafted from Japanese knotweed harvested from Franklin Park, you'll contort your body into a series of near right angles, perfect for a heart-moving speech to serve as a story's linchpin moment. Be the life of the party as main characters sit on you and deliver one of the most overwritten monologues in history. Boston is known for its varied cuisine, from New England clam chowder to Boston cream pie, but none is more iconic than Dunkin' Donuts, or as we locals call it, Dunkity-doo-doo! Oh, it's as Boston as sports fandom, public drunkenness, and redlining. Hey, this Halloween, pay tribute to America's favorite essential worker, the overwhelmed 19-year-old Dunkin' Donuts employee. Whoa, become immediately frazzled and get everyone's order wrong. Whoa, you ordered a coffee with no sugar? No siree, 3 heaping scoops all around. Yeah, get your friends to hassle you until you quit after just 2 weeks because it's not worth $13.50 an hour. Here's a costume we all know and love, a colonial tour guide on lunch break. Have hours of fun, walking from party to party, telling your friends you can't really pose for a photo because you only have 15 minutes until your next tour and you gotta eat this sandwich. Comes with a tricorn hat, an outdated cell phone, and a cardboard visitor center for you to smoke cigarettes behind. Whether it's Suffolk or Drexel, Temple or BC, residents of either city will get loads of scares with this costume. Incoming college freshman, ooh. Featuring matching t-shirt and sweatpants with writing in weird places, a lanyard and key card that you can leave in the room it unlocks, and a philosophy book that you'll never finish but will always carry to let everyone know just how deep you are. Spook your friends with hope and enthusiasm, untarnished by the knowledge that you've just signed away the next 40 years of income. Feeling like your Halloween festivities are down in the dumps? Well, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up as the guy who just dances in the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. Hey, bang around the room from side to side with stiff rhythmic motions in a fedora and plaid suit. No matter how badly you do it, everyone will still remember you as the best part of the night. And hey, if it goes badly, don't worry. Nobody knows your name anyways. Horn section not included. Dickie Barrett available on Cameo, probably. And finally, a costume of the thing that all Bostonians and Philadelphians fear. A note to your friends saying you've moved to New York. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Tea Party Tonight. I want to thank all of our guests, Dr. Barbara Clark-Smith from the Smithsonian. I want to thank Michael Norris from Carpenter's Hall. I want to thank everyone here at Revolutionary Spaces at the old State House, the Old South Meeting House. And next episode in December, we will be live. You can come here. You can sit in these seats. You can see what my pores look like up close. It's going to be amazing. We will see you then. Oh, sign up for the mailing list at revolutionaryspaces.org so that you can get tickets to come see the show.